Hey, and welcome. Thank you for joining us on this very first debut episode of the Back to the Table Board Gaming Podcast. My name is Bryce, and across from me is my lovely co-host and wife, Jessica.
Hello there.
How are you, babe?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be doing this debut episode.
As am I. Today, we are going to be looking at the game Zapotec, as well as introducing ourselves to you and breaking down just why the heck we're doing this show in the first place. Once again, this is the Back to the Table Board Gaming Podcast, a podcast about the board games on our shelves. Yes, not the ones we're waiting for on Kickstarter, not the ones people are talking about that are due to release next year, but no, the ones already on our shelves. This is going to be a little different than most of the board gaming podcasts you hear, whereas most hosts are about the newest game out there. We're going to take a look at games whose time in the sun has already come and gone. Maybe they used to be on the Board Game Geek hotness list. Maybe they never really got a chance to truly shine. They were overlooked. Either way, we're going to grab them off the shelves and take a closer look at them and see what's what.
We're really excited to be able to talk about games that we've played a lot of times. Often on a board gaming podcast, you're hearing people talk about a game they've only played once, maybe twice, maybe a handful of times. But a lot of games you really don't fully experience until you've played them probably a dozen or so times. And so it's really exciting to be able to talk about those games where the experience has evolved and your opinion of it has evolved because you've given it that opportunity to really explore it from every aspect.
Later on in the show, we'll really get into why we're doing this, and we'll talk about all of these things in a lot greater detail. For now, we'll just introduce ourselves. I should note, if you are a returning listener from our old podcast, odds are you never unsubscribed from YouTube, welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking it out. If you're hearing us for the first time, my name is Bryce. I have been a fan of board games since around 2019, and I have Jessica to thank for that.
That's right. What was the first game that we played? Well, the first game that you played with me, I think, was Boss Monster. Is that right?
No, it was before that. It was Betrayal House on the Hill.
That's right. That was a favorite of mine.
You were into games long before that. You tried showing me a modern board game. I grew up playing Sorry and Monopoly, and so I was just like, Betrayal is way too much. I don't know what this is. This is stupid. And then a year later, we happened to be looking at games at Target, and Boss Monster was on the shelves, as well as the Choose Your Own Adventure House of Danger. And I was playing a lot of Super Nintendo at the time. I was on this nostalgic kick, and those games just spoke to me, and that's when it clicked. And since then, I've been a fan. How far back does your board gaming go?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. I think I've always liked games. I remember playing them when I was a kid, probably some of the older ones like Sorry and Trouble, and I remember Don't Wake Daddy was a big one when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. And then for a while, my teenage years, I wasn't really playing, but I think in my early 20s was probably when I started playing like modern board games, I guess you'd say. I think when we met, I maybe had 2 or 3 games, and now we have like 200?
Yeah, we have a lot. Although some people would call that rookie numbers. I would say it's a healthy amount of games, and that's putting it very, very lightly.
Yeah, but I also feel like we've shifted. For a while, we were trying to make our collection bigger. Now we're really focusing on making it smaller. So I think 200 is a good number.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it whittles down and whittles out in the months and years to come. Anyway, we do own a lot of games, and one of those is Zapotec, the featured game of today's episode. Released in 2022 by Board and Dice Games, developed by Fabio Lopiano, this takes us back in time to the ancient culture of the real-life Zapotec people, where area majority, drafting, and hand management are the key to success. This is a Euro-type game, current price going for about $30 to $40 new, $20 used. And if physical copies aren't your thing, Tabletopia has a digital version for you to play anytime. Jessica, why don't you give us the stats?
Coming from Board Game Geek, the complexity rating is a 3.0. The user rating is a 7.1 with 1,500 ratings. Its current ranking is 2,423. The strategy rank is 1,173. The ranking on this one, it's kind of always been where it's at. It plateaued pretty early on. It never really rose much or fell much.
Just kind of coasted at that 2,400 spot?
Yeah, I think this is definitely an overlooked game. Maybe there's a reason for that, maybe not, but, well, that's what we're here to talk about.
That's exactly what we're here to talk about. Now, we have a lot of different and fun segments lined up for the show, a lot of different plans and directions we want to go with it. But being the debut episode, we're going to keep it just the meat and potatoes. So coming right up, we have the main event. We're diving right in to talk about Zapotec, coming at you in just a moment.
Set in the heart of ancient Oaxaca, Zapotec places you in the role of a noble ruler, guiding your people through cultural growth, religious devotion, and city-building ambition. Expand your influence across valleys and temples, organize sacred rituals, and build mighty pyramids as you compete to leave your mark on Meso-American history. Zapotec is a quick-playing resource management area influence game by Board and Dice Games. It plays 1 to 4 players in 45 to 90 minutes and is recommended for players 14 and up.
All right, so the object of Zapotec is very simple. You want to have the most points by the end of 5 rounds. And what you'll be doing to get those points is acquiring resources. You're going to populate the board with your buildings. You want to dominate that landscape. You're going to lend influence to the pyramids as they are built. You're going to perform rituals. And then you're also going to gain divine favor through sacrifices.
So let's talk about what the game looks like. You have your main board and then you have your player board. We'll talk about the player board first. At the top of the board is a nice little guide that tells you the cost of building different things. To the right of the board is your storage area. You're storing your building pieces, your palace pieces, and your pyramid pieces. The main function of the player board is going to be your resource grid. And the resource grid is a 3x3 grid, and it's got rows and columns, and each row and column is represented by one of the 3 basic resources in the game. In the beginning, you don't have anything except those basic resources, but throughout the game, as you build buildings, you're going to collect tiles that you put into your grid, and that's going to add to the resources that you're able to collect on the future turns.
All right, let's move on over to the main board now. There are 6 sections within the board here that you're going to want to pay attention to. First up and most noticeable are the 3 separate regions in which you can build your buildings. Each region is represented by one of 3 different gods, and within the god's region, you have 3 separate terrains. I cannot remember what they are called, but I always say jungle, mountain, and like dirt. It's what it looks like on the board anyway. And within those terrains, you have 3 different buildings, temple, field, and like village. And when you put your buildings out there onto the board in one of these regions, on one of the terrains, building one of those buildings, you're going to pick up that tile, turn it over, and it's going to give you 2 resources. You're going to take those resources and put it right there onto your grid. So every time you build, you pick up a tile, you have new resources somewhere on your grid so that the next time you tap into the grid, you'll have that many more resources to choose from on your rows and columns.
In the center of the board, there's an area where you will be building your pyramids. And the pyramids are kind of a collective effort between all the different players. So any pyramid could be built all by one player or built by multiple players. And the pieces of the pyramid are kind of ways to score at the end of the game. So the first person who builds the first piece of a pyramid gets to choose a corresponding scoring condition that's going to go with that pyramid. And every game, there's going to be different ones that are available to you. The scoring conditions are either going to be a building type, a terrain type, or a region. So you're going to be scoring for buildings that meet that scoring condition according to the pyramid pieces that you've contributed to that particular pyramid.
So Jessica mentioned on your resource grid, you start with some basic resources, but as you build the grid up, you're going to have access to special resources, and one of those is coins. And what the coins are going to allow you to do is buy trade tiles. These are set up at the kind of top right portion of the board, and the trade tiles are offered at 3 different levels. The higher the level, the more expensive the tile, but what these tiles do is they give you stuff. So the more money you spend, the more cool stuff you're going to get. It can be something as simple as 2 resources, bam, 2 new resources you didn't have before that you now do. Others will allow you to trade one resource for another, and you even have some tiles that will give you some really awesome, powerful benefits. But again, the cooler they are, the more expensive they get.
So over to the far right on the main board is the sacrifice track. This uses the other 2 special resources that you have, which are corn and priests. And you can use 1 priest in conjunction with 1 to 5 pieces of corn to raise your level on the sacrifice track, because that just checks out. You sacrifice corn to God, right?
No, you sacrifice people.
Well, in this game, you sacrifice corn. So as you jump up the sacrifice track, there's different benefits that you get at each level. Some of them are just points, some of them are resources, some of them make the trade tiles cost less for you. The other benefit is at the end of the game, whoever's at the highest point of the sacrifice track, they're going to get, I think, 9 points. And then anyone below them is going to get fewer points. So you want to definitely utilize that sacrifice track.
The other thing the priest can do for you is give you a claim on one of the ritual cards. These are going to be like end of game bonuses that are laid out at the start of the game. There's 3 or 4 cards?
3 to start.
3 to start. And so you can spend a priest and lay your little token down on one of the cards. And if you meet that condition by the end of the game, you're going to get those bonus points. I should also mention, because we forgot, the priest is also necessary to build pyramid pieces.
The last segment of the main board for us to talk about is the scoring section. That's going to have a scoring card in it. But first, let me take a moment to talk about the cards themselves. So the cards that you use for scoring are the same cards that you use to actually play the game. Each card at the very top is going to have a resource, one of the 3 basic resources. And then the main image of the card is going to be one of those scoring conditions. So either a region, a terrain type, or a building type. And then at the very bottom, there's a number. And at the beginning of every turn, everyone plays a card simultaneously. And whatever the lowest number is, that's the person who goes first. So every round, the turn order is determined by the number on that card that you play. And then the resource at the top of the card you play determines which of the rows and columns on your resource grid you're allowed to tap into that turn. And then the scoring condition on the card is going to tell you either where you can build your building or what type of building you're allowed to build, depending on which one it is.
So these cards come from a deck of cards called the Offer. And the Offer is going to be how you draw new cards throughout the course of the game. At the beginning of the game, you're going to have a couple of cards laid out depending on player count, and you're going to be trading the card you played for one of the cards in the Offer. This happens at the end of every round. Once everybody has drafted a new card, there will be 1 card left. That new card becomes the scoring conditions for the following round, and every card you turned into the Offer becomes the new Offer plus 1 additional card.
That was a lot of information. Let's put it all together and talk about what a turn looks like. So as I already mentioned, you start by playing a scoring card, and everybody plays their cards simultaneously. Once all the cards have been played, you reveal them, determine first player based on the numbers on the card, and then everyone simultaneously is going to collect their resources. Depending on what resources on the card that you played, that's what row or column you can tap into on your resource grid to collect those resources. After everyone has simultaneously collected their resources, then the turn order actually matters. Whoever goes first is going to be able to perform a number of free actions depending on whatever they can afford. So those free actions are going up the sacrifice track, performing a ritual, building a pyramid section, or purchasing trade tiles. You can also tap into your trade tiles at this point. Then, after you've done all your free actions, you can build buildings. Once you've completed your building, then play passes to the next player.
You're going to do that for 5 rounds, and at the end of the 5th round, you are going to pick up all your bonus points, end of game stuff. This will have to do with where you are on the sacrifice track. This will also have to do with the ritual bonuses if you completed them, and most importantly, the pyramids. If you have built a piece of the pyramid, you will score additional points for whatever building you have in the region or terrain or building that pyramid represents. Once you tally all that up, whoever has the most points is the winner. In case of a tie, check to see who's highest on the sacrifice track. And if it's still tied, well, you just share the victory.
Sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
All right, you know how to play. Let's talk about how to play well and how to win. This is a strategy sesh. Jessica, I got a lot.
Yeah, me too. Initially, I thought that the best strategy in terms of the resource grid was to spread your resources out, right? So no matter what card you play, you have more than one thing that you're getting. But then I realized this game is only 5 turns. So you really have to build things up much quicker than that. But it kind of depends on what's in your hand. So if you have a lot of the same resource card in your hand, you want to make sure that you're building up that particular resource row or column so that you can get a lot of stuff just from tapping into that over and over.
Yeah, I wrote that down as a strategy too. You're not going to be able to build your whole grid by the end of the game. More likely than not, you're not going to be able to do that. So it's important to at least have like one row or maybe a row and a column that you can constantly tap into that gives you a lot of resources, because now anytime I tap into that row, I'm going to get one of everything.
Yeah, but you want to make sure you pay attention to the cards that are available to you, because I had one game where I built up my wood row to be really solid and awesome, and then I realized I didn't have any wood cards left. There were no wood cards in the offer. I was never able to tap into it. It was a complete waste.
That is true. You do have to make sure you hold on to at least one of those. But if you can, I've noticed that it doesn't make going first as important, because sometimes going first is really important. If you don't have the resources you necessarily need, you want to make sure you get to where you need to go first. You want to make sure you buy the trade tile first, or you want to make sure you get your building out there first before anyone else does. But if you have all the resources to work with, it's not as important anymore.
Yeah, there's a little bit more flexibility there for sure.
So here's another one I have. Know when to lean into a round and when to lean into your overall strategy. Let me explain. When the scorecard comes out and say it wants to score for like dirt, you could build stuff in the dirt, but if you have a system set up to where it's like, I'd rather build in the jungle because I'm going to get more points at the end of the game for that, I would ignore the card.
I think it's definitely important to balance between those two things. I think I actually had that in there too, that you have to make sure that you're paying attention to the round and the end game scoring. Although one thing to note is that the round scoring is 2 points for building and the end game scoring is only 1 point per pyramid piece per building.
Well, let's talk about the pyramids, because I have start a pyramid. Don't just contribute to one, like start one, because if you start the pyramid, you get to decide what area of the board that pyramid's going to represent. So if you have built a lot of things in, say, the jungle spaces, and you put the pyramid out there first, you now get to say it's going to score again for all the jungles. But if you let somebody else do it, now you're kind of chasing whatever they're building unless you have room to start a new pyramid, which you sometimes do, but it depends on how late in the game it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have actually something semi-related to that, which is that the pyramids are actually worth more points if they're completed. So it actually makes sense, like if somebody else has already started a pyramid for something that you could score points off of, go ahead and contribute to that one, because the more likely it is that it's completed, the more points you're going to get.
Well, also, you don't want them completing the pyramid entirely by themselves, because if they do that, they get a massive extra bonus for being the only one who contributed to that pyramid. So I would say start a pyramid for sure, but if somebody else starts one, get in on that. Mm-hmm. If for no other reason than to rob them of points at the end.
Absolutely. The other thing is you don't want to ignore the sacrifice track or the ritual cards. I feel like the pyramids really want to be the center of attention, I think just because they're such a visually drawing component, but they're really not the meat of the game. Like you really get a lot of points from those other things, so you don't want to neglect those things.
Yeah, I had that one too. If you look at the sacrifice track, you score points along the way as you move up, like 1 point, then 2 points, then 3 points. And then when you get to the top, I think you score something. But if you're at the top above everyone else, you get an additional 9 points. When all's said and done, you can net up to 24 extra points in your game if you move all the way to the top of that track. So absolutely right. Do not overlook that sacrifice track. Same thing with the ritual cards. They don't score much, right? Like 6 points?
It depends. So some of them are 6 points for every set that meets the condition, right? So if you're able to do that multiple times, I think I scored 12 points on one of them the last time we played.
Right. Okay. So you can repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. But yeah, you definitely want to look at it. The other thing you want to do besides getting on other people's pyramids, building pyramids, we're talking about that, but also build your buildings. Like build, build, build. If you can build, you should build. If for no other reason, then you can build out your resource track as you put buildings onto the board. The resource track really is important. It's probably the heart of your game, because if you don't have the resources, you're kind of screwed. So the more resource tiles you have options at looking at, the better chance you have at building up your board. If you can't, or if you're just getting bad draws, then I would say pay attention to those trade tiles. Because let's say you don't have the stone you need, for example, but you have a trade tile that allows you to turn a brick in for 2 stone. So now you have a lot of bricks, but I can use them to give me stone, and now I have everything I need.
Yeah, I think it's really useful to use those trade tiles to convert things. And I feel like the sacrifice track is kind of a good way to do that too. Like, not exactly, but if you have a lot of corn for whatever reason, you use that to go up the sacrifice track. And not only is it going to give you resources as you hit certain levels, it also makes those trade tiles cheaper for you.
That's right. It does do that. And then you can tap into those trade tiles whenever you want going forward, so long as they have that ability. We didn't talk about the palace tile, and I think we should, because if you use it effectively, it can get you a lot of points. So the palace tile is a special tile you have at the start of the game. And when you go to build a building, you can put your palace tile out there, put your building on top of that. Now, you don't get the resource token you just built on top of. You have to kind of put it to the side. But every time that particular building scores, it's worth double the points. If you can manage to get it in a region that also is scored by the pyramid at the end of the game, you've netted yourself a lot of points.
And speaking of the scoring conditions, like, repeating themselves, that's one of the strategies is you really have to think about what card you're not taking from the offer, especially if you're not first. If you're first, it's like, okay, you don't know what other people are going to pick. But if you're towards the end, you get to decide not only what you can choose to play in the next turn, but also what's going to be scored. And so you want to make sure that you're picking something, or leaving something rather, that's going to be advantageous for you, or maybe just something that's not going to score your opponent a ton of points.
That's true. And we're talking about this game now in the strategy sesh here of get a pyramid out first, make sure you cover the board with your buildings, take advantage of this, utilize this. This game is really all about controlling the flow of the game, right? Because you only have 5 rounds, so it's going to happen really, really fast. You want to make sure that boat steers in the direction you want it to go. And everything you consider strategically has to do with controlling the outcome of the next round, or the next thing, or the next placement.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really just so much that you have to pay attention to. And you can't necessarily control what your opponents are going to do, but what you can control, you absolutely should.
Well, that's all I got. You got any more?
No, that does it for me.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of strategy there. Coming up in just a minute, we're going to discuss the game more generally speaking. We're going to get into our thoughts, what other people said, all that good stuff. But first, we're going to take a second to learn about the real-life Zapotec Empire.
While ancient Meso-America is mostly known for civilizations like the Aztec, Olmec, or Maya, the Zapotec Empire has also made its mark on ancient Mexican history, despite being less known in general history. Here are roughly five amazing facts about the real-life Zapotec peoples who inspired today's featured game. The Zapotec were located in the southern highlands of central Mesoamerica, specifically in the valley of Oaxaca, around 300 miles south of modern-day Mexico City. Their empire lasted roughly between the 1400-year period of 500 BC to 900 AD. Throughout their history, the Zapotec expanded far beyond the Oaxaca Valley, so much so that they've actually been classified as 3 separate subsections of peoples. There is evidence of not only trade routes, but also cultural ties with several different cultures throughout Mexico, including the Mayans, the Olmec, and most notably, the city of Teotihuacan. The Zapotec were such a presence in this ancient city that an entire quarter of it was specifically reserved for the Zapotec. Zapotec cities have shown high levels of writing, engineering, architecture, sport, and art. Evidence suggests that many Zapotec cities had systems of running water, which in turn helped to yield a very successful agricultural system. Along with a written language, the Zapotec also had a numerical system and a calendar. They were skilled sculptors as well. Many pieces of pottery, jars, figures, vases, and bowls survive today, many with amazing details of history, people, gods, and events. The Zapotec had a complex series of deities which they worshipped. Some were region-specific, while others were more universally accepted. These included gods for rain, war, crops, and death, along with several others. It is actually a vast array of gods and deities that has been described by historians as rather bewildering. Like most Meso and South American civilizations, evidence for human sacrifice exists as well. No one is quite sure just exactly what happened to the Zapotec to instigate their decline. After moving from one capital city to another, their dominance more or less faded from history around 900 AD without any real explanation. Other empires, such as the Aztec, would eventually take over, but the Zapotec influence would be remembered. Their history was not entirely erased out of existence by future empires, as was sometimes known to happen. Instead, their influence was used and built upon by the peoples that followed. In fact, descendants of the Zapotec people are still around today in the Oaxaca Valley, and their languages remain intact.
So without a doubt, this game obviously got overlooked the year it came out. And I think it's really a shame because this game is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I really like this one. I feel like there's a lot of game there in like kind of a big game in a small package. Not that it's a small package, but you know what I mean? Like it's kind of simple in terms of what you do, but there's just so much variety and so much replayability. It's just never the same game twice.
No, it's not. And I want to focus on that resource grid for a second because that's the thing about this game that blew me away. The idea of like tapping in to a resource grid and building upon it and giving more stuff as the game progresses. The game doesn't say it has engine building in it, but in a way, this resource grid is kind of like you're building an engine because every time you tap into it, you're going to get more stuff, which is going to allow you to do more stuff. I think that is so cool and clever. Every aspect of the game interconnects well. Like the resources give you the stuff so you can move up the track, so you can buy this, so you can lay the pyramid down, so you can score points for the buildings that you put out there to get the resources. Like it all intertwines and connects really, really well. There's no like weird, awkward kind of, you have some games where it's just like they have something in there and you're like, well, that didn't need to be in there. This doesn't have that.
Yeah, I feel like every piece is necessary and it balances out the different types of resources. Like everything is kind of used sort of equally, but there's a randomness in what you're going to draw in those tiles and what resources you're going to be able to utilize. And the game is designed in such a way that if you end up with a whole bunch of priests or a whole bunch of coins or a whole bunch of corn, you can actually work with that to your advantage. Even though they all have different functions, there's ways to utilize each of those functions to kind of make other resources work for you.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be balanced, but you're absolutely right. It gives you an out because some games can be really unforgiving if you don't manage X or Y. Even if the resources end up screwing you over, because that happened to me a couple of plays ago, actually. I just got all bricks everywhere. I had nothing but brick. It was really frustrating. The game doesn't last that long. 5 rounds. 2 people can play this game. I'm talking setup to playing to putting back into the box in less than an hour. So if you don't have a great game, dude, you'll be playing again in no time.
That's true. But at the same time, the fact that it's so fast means that it's really easy to have a bad game, actually. I feel like one wrong move and your whole game is just totally screwed. But at least it's over quickly. So, like you said, you're not just sitting there waiting for it to be over for 20 turns.
Right. But again, I want to lean on the idea that for as fast as it plays, there are so many strategic considerations. It almost feels like a whirlwind of a game sometimes.
Yeah, I think the quickness of it is part of what makes it such a different experience every time you play. Because if you had a longer game, then you might almost repeat the same strategy every time. But because you have such a short period of time and so much that you want to do, you have to really adapt to what's out there, to what the cards are, to what the scoring conditions are, to what the tiles you get are. You have to think quickly and strategize like big in a very short amount of time.
You got to play round to round, but also consider the game as a whole. That's really cool. The fact that they were able to put that all together in a game that plays so fast. I keep harping on that because, well, we like fast games. You know, longer games kind of don't hold our attention as much. So it's kind of like a hit workout of a game. It's really intense, but for a really short amount of time. I dig it. What I don't dig, though, the game is horrendously ugly. I will give them credit for not shying away from the idea of sacrifice because, you know, a lot of people get a little squeamish about ancient cultures who did human sacrificing. And the game was like they sacrificed corn, not people, but like they still had it in there. So props to them for leaving that in. But the game's ugly. It's horrendously ugly.
I think it's what's weird about it is the player pieces are these like bright kind of neon colors. I mean, plus black, but like there's a bright pink, there's a bright orange.
Looks like an 80s music video.
Yeah, but then the actual board and the pieces and the cards are like, I don't know, they're like an 8-bit video game from the 90s, kind of.
Yeah, it looks like bad computer graphic art from like the late 90s.
It's a totally different color scheme. It's a really different like vibe. So it almost feels like the pieces don't belong to the same game.
I think they wanted the pyramids to like stand out, you know, so when you look at the back of the box, you see these bright pyramids. But yeah, for me, it absolutely does not work. Kind of get nitpicky here, but I mean, it does bother me. There's space for everything on the board, right? You have your tiles and your pyramids and you have the scorecard. There's space for everything except the ritual cards. The ritual cards have to be put to the side, off the board. And it's the only thing off the board. Next to the pyramids, you have these big instructions for how to build a pyramid or how to use a priest. They have a player aid already. Couldn't you have put the ritual cards in that space so that everything's nice and concisely on the board? That would have been awesome.
That would have been nice. Yeah, that is nitpicky, but I also agree.
Jess, when you play this, do you feel a strong thematic sense?
No.
Nah, me neither. This is about as dry of a Euro as can be.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the mechanics of it. I feel like it's unique. It's not like other games in our collection, but it doesn't, it's like I don't feel like I'm in the Zapotec Empire making sacrifices to gods or whatever.
Yeah, you're not building pyramids, but the mechanical stuff does work. And it should be noted, I like the rule book. It's very detailed. It shows pictures of everything. It actually gives you examples of turns and actions throughout the course of the game. Really easy and thorough. And I like that a lot because not every rule book does that.
Yeah, this one was pretty easy to learn, and that's definitely something I appreciate. There's nothing I hate more than you spend all this time setting up a new game, and then it takes you an hour and a half to learn the rules, and by that time, you're exhausted. You don't even feel like playing anymore. It's the end of the night. You're like, oh, God, I haven't even started playing yet, and I'm already burned out. And this game definitely did not do that. So that's enough about our thoughts. Let's get into what other people said.
Hey, Bryce from the future here. Just wanted to chime in real quick and let you know that the comments we are going to be discussing right now come from the many forums and threads about today's featured game given by other gamers. Now, in the future, we hope to be able to give these commenters a shout out when they volunteer their opinions to us on their own accord. However, today, we're going to leave those names anonymous because we want to respect their privacy. They didn't ask to be on the show. They weren't volunteering information. And so just to respect that privacy, we're going to keep the comments anonymous. Hopefully, though, in the future, we will be able to open up a broader dialogue where we can give people shout outs and love. That's the plan. But for now, anonymous. Let's get back into it.
Well, there was a lot of praise for the subtle complexities of the game, which is expected.
Yeah, obviously.
We like that too. That makes perfect sense. Some people said the pyramids were an overhyped aspect of the game, which I can kind of see that.
See, I saw that. I disagree. I think the pyramids actually are important. Those bonus points at the end can be all the difference. Like we said, if you ignore the pyramids and somebody builds one all by themselves, have you moved up the resource track enough? Or not the resource, I keep calling it the resource track, the sacrifice track enough to compensate for that? Odds are you haven't.
I mean, I would say they're important, but they're probably about, in most games, unless somebody completely ignores the pyramids and somebody else goes crazy on them, I think they're about equally important as the other scoring aspects.
Well, I'll tell you what, next time we play, let me build a whole pyramid and we'll see what the score says. Our complaint about the artwork and the component quality was heard and repeated many times. People complimented the functionality of the board, but they said that the resource tiles didn't stand out enough. They said that they blended it into the board really well, or not really well. Well, yeah, really well, because they couldn't see them. And the ritual cards, they said, were too small. They were hard to read, which they are. They're kind of like Ticket to Ride sized. And the text is very, very tiny. You will have to check the rule book to see what each symbol on the cards mean. But again, the rule book's awesome because it has an appendix in the back. So there is at least that. But yes, they are very small. I don't think the tiles are camouflaged. Do you?
No, I didn't really have any problem seeing them. I mean, they do match exactly with the picture behind them, but I feel like it's pretty easy to see where they are.
This must have been an old guy who wears like really thick glasses or something. People had very underwhelming things to say about the components. Some liked it, some really liked it, but overall it was meh.
A lot of people complimented how the scorecard drafting works.
Agreed. That deck is very clever.
Yeah, I love that when you're choosing what card you want, you have to kind of balance between what am I going to want to play and what am I going to want to score.
Yeah, and you have to realize that everyone else is thinking the same thing. So there's a push and pull here. Do you want to go first? Okay, you're going to take the card with the lower number, but it might not be the resource column or row you want. Lots to think about. It's a very clever, that with the resource grid, that is just so clever. I'm glad people like it because it's what makes the game shine. Here's something interesting. People say that it drags on a bit with more than two players. They say that this is best at two players. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a hard time commenting on that because we mostly play it with two players. I think we played it one time with three, and I don't really remember.
No, we've never played this with three.
No, we didn't?
This has always been either you or me, or I played with Lisa once, but that was it.
Oh, I thought the three of us played one time, but I must be making that up. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't comment on that, but I do like it at two players. I feel like it's a perfect length.
Well, we like most things at two players. The complaint was that the analysis paralysis kicks in because it's not just about, do I want to put my building in this terrain? It's, can I put it in this terrain and make it worth points next round? And with two players, you have a lot of space on the board to work, so if you were to put a building on a village I wanted, okay, that's fine. There's a village over there. Now that tends to not be the case as you get to the end of the game, but by the end of the game, I already know how I'm scoring. I already know where I want to be. I'm not so desperate to find a space or a building on the board. But with four players, people said that it gets a little tight, gets a little intense. You have more spaces that you can play with once you have 3 and 4 players. More spaces open up, but people just start to rack their brain really trying to figure out what's what. Fast game, 5 rounds, but like we said, a lot to think about, and that kind of made people go, 2 players, that's all I want to play with.
I could see that, especially with choosing the card at the end of the round, because like when it's just 2 players, there's 3 cards, right? I know what card I pick, and then I just have to think, which one of these 2 are you going to pick?
Right.
And then I'll know the other one's going to be the scoring card. When you have more people, there's a lot more analysis that you have to do, I guess. Like you have to think about what each other player might choose and what contingency that might lead to. And I could definitely see that being a lot of analysis paralysis.
Well, because if you think about it, the game is supposed to go by really quick. It's 5 rounds. It's a fast Euro. 2 people can do it in less than an hour. So I imagine 3 people at that same pace, hour 15 maybe. 4th person, hour and a half. That's a great 90-minute game. 4 players making these big, tough decisions. But some people didn't like that. Mm-hmm. On the other side of that, people said that the game was too short. Most people had no problem with it. In fact, I think it's one of the shining aspects of the game, but people critiqued the short playtime. But somebody did bring up an interesting aspect of it. The setup takes kind of a while for what it is. That was the complaint, because they're right. You have to lay out all the tiles, and you have to flip them over, and you have to shuffle them around. Then you got to place them, and then you got to stack all the trade tiles and put them in their spot. It can take like 10 minutes to set up if you're not used to the board, maybe longer. And then you have this really, really fast game. Maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze for them.
Yeah, I could see that. I will admit, the first time I played this game, I thought it was too short too. And there's a lot of games where I feel like this, where I feel like there's too much to do and there's not enough time to build it up. But now that I've played it more times, I realize you just have to figure out how to maximize it. Like, I didn't even realize the first time I played that you can build more than one thing on the same turn. And it didn't occur to me to just build up one column or row in your resource grid. So I was thinking, like, you have to build everything up in 5 turns, and that's just not how this game works. And so I'd be curious if those people who think it's too short, how many times they've actually played it.
Well, that's the whole point to the Back to the Table podcast. We're taking it, we're looking at it, we're playing it multiple times. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, well, and it makes a difference.
It does. It really does. All right, we're about ready to wrap up the conversation for Zapotec. We're going to close with some lowlights, some highlights, and the game in a nutshell for us. Jess, what are your lowlights?
The artwork, and I wrote how short it is, which is really funny because we were just talking about how I like that, but it is kind of frustrating sometimes because it feels like you're just starting to get things going and then you run out of time. So that can be a little frustrating sometimes. My highlights, though, are just how replayable it is, that it's a different game every time you play, and in large part because of the multi-use cards. I love the way the cards function in the game. I think that's so clever, and it just really makes for an interesting experience every time.
Awesome. My lowlights are, it's an ugly game, for sure, and I do think the randomness sometimes when you pull resources can absolutely wreck you. If you don't get the resources you need, sometimes it can go so bad that you can't rescue yourself. However, my highlights, this is a game with great mechanical cohesion. This plays fast, but you have a lot of thinky choices to consider. The resource grid is so clever, and the decisions you make and the benefits and progression that come from them can be super, super satisfying. Jessica, in a nutshell, this is a very clever game that suffers from horrendous artwork.
Absolutely, and I feel like this is a game that you have to play it over and over to really enjoy it, to really understand what's great about it, to figure out how to maximize everything in the short amount of time that you have. And if you give it that chance with multiple plays, you'll find that it's unique and clever and fun.
Definitely worth getting back to the table?
Absolutely.
Especially for that price. That is Zapotec. If you have it, get it off the shelf onto the table. If you don't, consider checking it out.
Have you played Zapotec? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and leave a comment wherever you're listening. Coming up next, we're going to unbox the why of the show.
All right, this is a segment of the show we are calling Unboxing, where we discuss one of the many aspects within the world of board gaming. A lot of different cogs and gears that turn within this hobby, and we are going to cover them here by unboxing them. All right, Jess, we are here today to unbox the why of this particular podcast. There are a ton of board gaming podcasts out there. There are that many more board game video channels out there. Why would somebody be interested in checking this show out? Let us unbox our case today for this show.
Well, I think first and foremost, I don't think we're alone in being burned out on the hype. Just learning new games is exhausting. And every time you come to the table, if you're having to learn an entirely new rulebook, it stops being as fun. And I think it's just a lot more relaxing of a hobby if you're playing something that you're already familiar with. And so I think that we wanted to channel that, and we wanted to share that with other people too.
You're correct. I think you do burn out constantly learning a new game and constantly looking at a new game and what's the next one and what's the next one. I think this burnout is happening more and more with more people, both in the board gaming world as like people who play and also people who make content. I think the tariff situation, whether you feel one way about it or another, I don't really care about that, but I think it's given people pause, because they stop spending their money on the next game and the next game, and they realize like, holy crap, I'm a little burned out from the next game and the next game. And I think this is where a show like ours comes in.
Yeah, I think the cost increase definitely plays a role in it. And also just the other issues that have come along with that, the shipping delays and the other complications that game makers are running into. I think that everybody's starting to realize like, maybe we should just slow down a little bit. You'll notice a lot of the games that are coming out right now are either remakes or expansions, anniversaries, kind of looking back at other games, or alternately, you're seeing smaller games. I guess to combat the tariffs, the shipping costs are lower on a smaller game with less components.
Yeah, so things are definitely moving and shaking in a direction that might make somebody take a look at their board gaming shelves and want to get something back to the table, right? Because they're not spending money on that extravagantly expensive Kickstarter that may or may not show up, that they may or may not get dicked over with when it comes to like shipping and whatnot. So this just seemed for us like a good opportunity to encourage that energy.
And I think it's a fun way for us to go through our collection too. On a personal level, we've been trying to whittle down our collection. We mentioned earlier, we're trying to make our collection smaller. We're trying to really focus on the things that we enjoy. And we're looking at each game and we're asking ourselves, is this something that's really awesome and really fun? And if it isn't, does it deserve space on our shelf?
That makes me want to go back to what you said earlier about hype. You mentioned hype. And when I look at board games and I think about hype, I gotta say, I think hype completely destroys any honest assessment of whether or not a board game is good or not, or whether it's for your table or not. There are many games on our shelves that enjoyed a lot of hype when they first came out, and maybe we did bite on it when it was new and we bought it and we got it to the table once and we said, oh, that's great. But what happens if you get it to the table a second time and a third time? Was that game worth the hype it received? I think that's a good question. I think that's a fair question. And I think more people should be asking it. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. And I think on the same token, but sort of opposite, we have a lot of games on our shelves that never really got any hype, but that we really enjoy. And at first, we kind of thought like, oh, maybe we're just not playing the right games. Like if these are the ones we really like, but those are the ones that are super hyped, maybe we just need to find the better games. Like maybe there's way better games out there. But I think that in retrospect, bringing things back to the table over and over, you're going to realize that some of those games that missed the hype are actually worth it. They're actually really great, even if other people didn't notice it.
Especially now, since they're a couple years older, you can pick them up for really cheap, say at a used board game store or at the geek market. You can go on Board Game Geek and find a ton of deals from private sellers. So if there is an underrated game that maybe you played once or you overlooked it because something else came out, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, this is your chance to hear about it, potentially, hopefully on this show, and go, hey, yeah, for 10, 15 bucks, I'll check that out.
Which is really great because, as we mentioned and everyone knows, board games are getting infinitely more expensive.
They absolutely are. So why not get your money's worth by getting a game back to the table? Because honestly, if you think about what a game is designed to do, it's meant to be played more than once. It's meant to be played a lot. You had mentioned earlier, and I'm paraphrasing, but a game doesn't really truly get to be experienced until you get it to the table a dozen or so times.
I think maybe for some games, a dozen might be more plays that are necessary. But I think there's a lot of games where you just get a little bit more out of it every time you get it to the table.
Yeah, I guess you don't need a dozen plays for every single game out there. But another thing too is like certain games just grab you, right? Like there's something about it. Maybe it's not the greatest game ever, but something after a play or two grabbed you and it makes you want to come back to it more than a dozen times. We have lots of games that we have played way more than a dozen times because it grabs us. If you're only playing a game once or twice, maybe that opportunity has not been had, and you're missing something that you really could get a lot of enjoyment out of. And I think that's what this show is here to try and do.
I think you're right. I think we actually have a handful of games I can think of where the first time or maybe the first couple times we played them, we weren't really that into them. We were on the fence. And there's even been games that we had on the chopping block and we were like, let's just give it one more play and see what we think. And then we ended up loving them. So you never know unless you give it a fair shot.
And what better way to do that than right here on this show where all the hype is gone. We're taking a look at it honestly. I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you listening have a lot of fun with us. I don't know if the show will succeed. We're not going to be putting out very many of them very often. We have a lot going on in our day-to-day typically. But stick with us. I think you're going to have a good time. Well, there you have it. Hopefully, this will be a show for you, and you'll stick with us as we continue on in this adventure. Episode 1, always kind of a weird episode. Episode 1, right? Because you're getting your feet wet and you're kind of figuring out what's what. But I think overall we did a pretty good job. If you liked it, show us some love. Like it from wherever you are listening. If subscription is an option, follow us. Do all the things. We don't have any social media, but if you do want to reach us, backtothetablepodcast@gmail.com is how you do it. Hit us up with your comments and your suggestions and anything else you want to give us about the show. We're morphing it and shaping it as we go. It's episode 1.
On our next episode, whenever that is, we're going to be talking about the game Ulm.
Should be a lot of fun. In the meantime, I'm Bryce. That's been Jessica. And we'll catch you later.